if you're watching this, you're probably watching it to discover how to write some basic cursive. In order to write basic cursive, you do need some instruments. You can just use regular notebook paper. I'm going to go ahead and start with bigger lined paper, but my later videos will be working with just regular notebook paper, college ruled. If you are using regular notebook paper, you'll want to use a pen with 0.5 or just a very narrow tip. A ballpoint pen or an ink pen with just a finer tip will be perfect for this. If you're using bigger lined paper, like what I will be using, so bigger lined paper, you're going to want a 0.7 tip or a larger tipped pen just to give you some wider lines so they're not very, very shaky. Also, you'll want a reference guide, and on my reference guide, I'm using New American Cursive. My reference guide doesn't come with guidelines, meaning it doesn't come with lines that show me where I start on my letter and where I'm supposed to go towards, so I am having to write them in myself. I already have one line made up. This is my old and abused one, but you can find these when you Google them. But you'll want a reference, and you can glue it into the top of your notebook, or just keep it nearby in a plastic sleeve, or just, I don't know, tape it on your wall, whatever works for you. I'm using a New American Cursive reference guide, and it goes from A to Z. There are two main types. There's the traditional cursive, which has a little bit more loops, and then there's the New American Standard. Either one is fine. People argue which one's the best. I'm doing New American just to keep some consistency. Today I'm going to show you A, B, C, D, and E, and how to write those as separate capitals and lowercase, and then how to write them connected if they do connect. The only one that doesn't connect is my D. So I'm just going to make a little mark with my 0.7 that he doesn't connect. This capital letter does not connect to my lowercase letter. My D actually begins here and continues on, and he finishes here. My lowercase d starts here and continues on and finishes here. So this finish point doesn't really match up with this beginning point. Also, my E does connect, and so does my lowercase e to my uppercase because of where they start and finish. C starts and finishes the same way, and lowercase b is our one kind of trickster here, just because he doesn't really look anything like his print self. All right. I'm doing just 2 lines of each letter, but feel free to do more as you need practice and as you need to keep them neat. I don't have the perfect handwriting, but I am trying to provide correct form. So for A, capital A, lowercase a, we start at the top of our line, go down, we backtrack, and tail. This tail is important just because as you learn to connect letters, if you're not making that tail, you're not practicing connection. So be aware of your tail. My lines don't have any dashed lines or red or blue. They're actually all the same color, except these 2 are my darker lines. So I'm going to refer to them as first, second, third, and fourth, just to kind of help. So my A starts at my first line, touches my third line, and then finishes at my second line. Lowercase a starts at the second line, touches the third, and then finishes at the second line. Again, uppercase, backtrack, tail, lowercase, backtrack, tail. They're the exact same except on where they start. Now for connections, all you do is trail into your lowercase a. So uppercase, backtrack, backtrack, tail. Uppercase, backtrack, backtrack, tail. Uppercase, backtrack, backtrack, tail, uppercase, backtrack, backtrack, tail. When I say backtrack, I'm just meaning I'm going back over a line that I've already drawn. So be careful of that. B starts on our second line with his tail, goes up, backtracks, curls above the second line, and then tails. Now your tail can be shorter, can be longer. It all depends on you. If you're trying to stay as close to the guide as possible, your tail should come out horizontal. Lowercase b starts on the third line, goes up, curls in a little bit, touches, and then touches again. So he does a dip. He almost looks like a lowercase b, if you can see it, but he's not a lowercase b, so you do need to leave space. Uppercase B starts at the second line, backtracks, curls before the second line, and then finishes off. Lowercase b Now to connect these, uppercase b can connect to lowercase b because of where he finishes, he can come down and go back up. Start on your second line, backtrack, curl, and we're going to go into our lowercase b. Same thing again, backtrack, go into our lowercase b. Okay, I am getting a little round here. I want to keep my guide close by so I can keep checking. He doesn't get too round, so I want to make a note and do it better next time. Getting better. One more time to finish our line. And there we go. On to C. C is like a print C. We're just careful of where he begins and where he ends so that we can tail correctly. All right. Uppercase, you can kind of do a bit of a head on him, which means I come down and then go up. You can or you can't. According to New American Cursive, if we look again, there is a little bit of a head, but I mean, depending on what you need this for, how picky are you going to get? Lowercase c is the same way. We just make sure we come up with our tail. Again, uppercase C finishes on the second line. Lowercase c starts and finishes on the same line. All right, for connections, uppercase, and we're going to backtrack. Same thing again. So we have to develop the curve there, and backtrack. Develop your curve. There you go. Same thing here. Develop your curve. So the tricky part is that you're needing to make the top of your C and then backtrack over it. So be careful. For D, this is our special one that does not connect. So I'm just going to do one line. Our D starts at the top, loops, comes through, and then loops. I'm a little round just because I didn't make him as angled. Lowercase d starts on the second line, comes up, stays, backtracks, and tails. Again, uppercase D comes down at an angle, touches, curves, and then tails. Lowercase d, backtracks, and tails. The slower you go the first few times, the better, just to kind of help yourself. But you can always try really fast to see if actually the muscles in your hand are better for that. It might depend on just your hand. All right, and then one more for today. E, I'm going to go to my next page. E can connect, so I'm going to show you two separate here, and then show you 4 connects. E also has a head when you start. You make your curve, do your loop before the second line, and then tail. Lowercase e starts on the third line, touches the second, and then ends on the second line. keep your tails because they help you connect later on. So if you're practicing your separates with tails, it's going to make connecting your letters later on and connecting your words later on much easier. Again, you can do it without the head and tail and tail. All right, so now to connect these, you're just going to flow into your lowercase e. You're even starting to make it here so they become very close together. You can see one example already. All right, before the second line, and flow into your lowercase e. Uppercase for the second line, make your loop, flow into your lowercase e. Uppercase, make your loop for the second line, flow into your lowercase e. And one more time, loop for the second line, and then flow into your lowercase e. They should be pretty uniform. If they're not, give yourself some more space and practice. I started with bigger lines just to get my muscles used to the flow of the letters. If you want, you can use your bigger lined paper just as smaller lines, so I can make smaller e's. And just remember your guides. So then you start to notice that, oh, my lowercase e is only half the size of my uppercase e. You'd want to keep that in mind when you do your smaller letters. The same thing applies to your A, your B, your C, and your D. Your lowercase d's head is half the size of your uppercase. Your lowercase c is half the size of your uppercase. Your lowercase b has half lower and half higher. So you have a bit of a symmetry here. Same thing for A, half the size of uppercase A. So when you go to your smaller lines, you should notice a very similar thing happening when you're connecting your letters compared to your uppercase. Your lowercase letters will be about the same size, except in half. But they might be similar in dimensions, or they might be, like D, completely different, but similar in print. I hope this was helpful for you. Please feel free to re-watch it or slow it down on some parts. It's not perfect, but it's always a start. Thank you, and see you again next time.